Okay, I think we're on. Um, all right, so I just wanted to do a quick wrap up of the Night of the Cart so that we can stay on our reading schedule. I know today is a snow day, yay, but of course there's no rest for the professors ever, and I know probably not for you guys either because you have midterms coming up. So let me just quickly review what we talked about on Tuesday, and then I will talk about the highlights, describe the highlights, I think, of the second half, and then the problems of interpretation. About 12, 13 minutes. I'll talk fast. First of all, it's a romance, which is a quest, involves a quest or an adventure for fame, treasure, or better, an heiress. Usually, romances involve the education or the maturation of the knight, and that often um, results from conflicting codes or conflicting value systems. What we seem to have in the Knight of the Cart is a series of tests or manifestations of courtly love or demonstrations of chivalry. Courtly love, we talked a little bit about the way it seems, the way it's represented in Chrétien's The Knight of the Cart. Certainly, there's suffering, as Capellan has talked about, chastity, which we would call fidelity now, service, obedience, secrecy, of course, because it's adulterous in this case, and all consuming. Chivalry. We always hear about the chivalric code. There's lots of codes, right? And so it's best to take evidence from the text to give us an idea of what chivalry meant, at least circa 1200, rounding up. Granting mercy. We see Lancelot doing this. Bravery, obviously, courtesy to others, not being proud, right? Keeping your word, keeping your oath. Maleagant knows, for instance, when Lancelot is released to go fight in that tournament where he does his worst, that he'll come back if he made the promise to. Regard for reputation. That's why initially getting into the cart, Lancelot is kind of torn, right, between reason, which tells him not to, and love, because it will ruin his reputation, and of course it does. And then helping the weak. Lancelot's quest should be to be helping Arthur's people who have been, you know, they're in this land from whence no one returns because of this custom. And he only helps them really as a byproduct. What he's really interested in is rescuing the queen. All right. So, some highlights of the second half. We left off on page 252, where where Lancelot is finally named. Up to this point, he's been anonymous, and he's only named once he's in the presence of the queen, which tells us, right, that his sense of himself, his self value, is derived from Guinevere. All right. In this ridiculous scene, again, I just don't know what to do about the tone, to tell you the truth, of this romance. He's trying to fight Maleagant. The queen's up in the tower, and so he has to fight so he can watch her with his sword behind his back. Um, she says, restrain himself when Maleagant's father steps in, and this is a manifestation of Lancelot's obedience, and she saves Maleagant twice in this way. After all he's gone through, Guinevere on 256 rejects Lancelot when he finally gets to meet her. The king even says he's risked his life to come here. And Lancelot leaves full of tears. He's always crying, which was okay in the Middle Ages for men. Um, and and we find out later on 262 it was because she says he hesitated 2 steps, the time that it would take to take 2 steps when he was supposed to get into the cart immediately. Lancelot is taken prisoner, and he then tries to hang himself on 259 to 60 from his horse because rumor, which is always wrong, has gotten to him that somehow, or that Guinevere had died and she was starving herself because she had heard Lancelot had died, etc. And then we have the consummation scene on 264 to 265. By medieval standards, this is pretty sexy. Guinevere says on 264, okay, before you tear the bars off or out of the stone, I'm going to go get in bed, right? Meaning, in case we get caught, it'll look like he's breaking into her room. And so he pulls in the middle of 264, he pulls the bars off. Of course, in the process, he slices his little finger. He cuts off, apparently, his fourth finger to the first bone or there. And although the window is 264, second to last paragraph, although the window was high up, Lancelot passed quickly and easily through it. He found Kay asleep in his bed. He came next to the queen. Lancelot bowed and adored her. For in no holy relic did he place such faith. The queen stretched out her arms toward him, embraced him, clasped him to her breast, and drew him into bed beside her, showing him all the love she could, inspired by her heartfelt love. Goes on from there, and of course the poet coyly tells us it's best that you just imagine what happened. When he's leaving, we see all this very odd religious language. He suffers true martyrdom at the top of 265 and a martyr's agony, crying again, of course, because he has to leave the next morning. And on parting, Lancelot bowed low before the bedchamber as if he were before an altar. Right? And of course, there's blood all over the sheets because of his wounds. Some people, this is just sort of a plot device so that Maleagant can then blame Kay for having slept with the queen. But some people have suggested it's also, there's so much symbolism, right, in this poem that perhaps it represents, sort of a virginal state of mind, one might say, on the part of the queen, because she's with her true love. Just a minute, bear with me, let me just move this up. The seriousness of Lancelot's actions with the queen is suggested on page 267 when Kay is accused by Maleagant of having had sex with the queen. He says, permit me to reply, this is the second paragraph from the top on 267, and I shall acquit myself. May God never absolve my soul after I leave this world, if ever I lay with my lady. Indeed, I would much rather be dead than to have committed such a base and blameworthy act against my lord. May God never give me healing for these wounds I bear, but let death take me at once if I ever contemplated such an act. I know my wounds bled profusely this night and soaked my sheets. This is why your son suspects me, but he certainly has no right to. And Maleagant says, never has a knight of your stature committed such an impropriety, and you are disgraced by it. All right. So the seriousness, the treasonous nature of Lancelot's love is revealed here. Lancelot is tricked again by a dwarf. He never learns. He never suspects deceit. Gawain is fished out of a river. He had taken the underwater bridge. And so we see, I think we have the parallel Gawain plot, partly because, as I said last time, Gawain acts as a foil, right? He kind of comments on Lancelot's actions and Arthur's actions at the start and points out when they are not reasonable. But he also is not able to complete his quest, right? Love strengthens Lancelot. Lancelot goes to the tournament where he does his worst, again demonstrating he is willing to sacrifice his reputation, even though he is masked, but suffer, shame for the queen. Maleagant's sister then finds him. She seeks off to return the favor. He had given her the head of a knight earlier in the romance that she had demanded. That was when Lancelot was torn, conflicted between granting mercy to a knight and granting compassion. Compassion and mercy to the knight and granting generosity, right, or courtesy to the girl. And She rescues him from the tower, and he goes back to Arthur's realm. And in this climactic fight with Malagant, in which Lancelot will not grant mercy, and no one would expect him to at this point, he kills on 294 Malagant, cuts off his arm, eviscerates him, smashes his head, smashes his face, and then cuts off his head. Okay. I think people in the Middle Ages would have loved the violent scenes. I'm just guessing. So the main problem with how to read this romance is Lancelot a hero, right, or a joke? Is he a paragon or a cautionary figure? So, as I just said, we might say that his love does make him strong. He succeeds where Gawain fails. He saves not only the queen, who has been kidnapped, but he also saves Arthur's people, who are able to come home. He is a much better knight than the knights he's surrounded by, right? Not only some of the jerks he comes in contact with on his quest, but also Kay, the proud knight, Malagant. The problem is, what do we do with his suicide attempts, right? The first one where he's going to throw himself out the window when he's trying to watch Guinevere go by in that funeral train, or when he thinks Guinevere is dead, so he tries to hang himself from his horse. Again, the sort of, I don't know, disgraceful nature of what he's doing with the queen is really suggested by Kay's horrified reaction to being accused of that. And it's interesting that everybody knows about the cart, as I said last time, in the days before social media. This is something we might expect now, but yeah, how do they all know that? And one scholar in an interesting article suggests that the cart is really an objective correlative for the shame that Lancelot carries with him, the shame being his passion or his love for the queen. And I think in the end, we do have what would you call, some kind of resolution or maturation, maybe, of Lancelot, in the sense that on 289, Malagant's sister has rescued him, gotten him better, given him arms, etc. And he does say, first paragraph on 289, my dear friend, to God and to you I give thanks for being healed and healthy. Because you have made possible my escape, I give you my heart, my body, my service, my possessions to take and keep whenever you wish. For all that you have done, I am yours. Yet I have been absent now for a long time, and he wants to go back to court. But he says, I'll come back. And we also see on the next page the queen. We're a return to that motif of being, or not motif, but the idea, the conflict of love and reason. This time it's on the part of the queen. We don't hear about it in terms of Lancelot. And this is the very top of the page, about 10 lines down. The queen can scarcely restrain herself from following her heart to him. But reason had subdued these foolish thoughts and this love madness. Reason controlled her foolish heart and thought and brought her to her senses. And so we do, I guess, have some sense of resolution here at the end, right? And finally, this is just a still from, this is Guinevere and Lancelot from BBC's Merlin, which is a really fun, if you like the Middle Ages or you like the Arthurian myth stuff, it's a fun series to watch. Thanks for listening.